Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my December wrap-up. In December I read 5 books, which meant that I closed out the year reading a grand total of 50 books. If you watched my channel earlier in the year, you might know that my initial reading goal for the year was 60 books, but as the year went on and it wasn't really treating me that well, I ended up lowering my goal to 50 books because I thought that that would be a little bit more reasonable for me with everything that was going on in my life at the time, and even that was a little bit of a struggle to reach it, but I just made it there on the final day of the year. So yes, I finished 50 books, which I am happy with. So without further ado, let's jump into the 5 books that I read in December. I've got a plethora of different kinds of books here that I read. I read 2 novels, 1 short story, 1 graphic novel, and 1 manga, which was actually my first manga that I ever read. So I'm just gonna go in the order that I read the books in, starting off with One by One by Ruth Ware. So this is a mystery book. I don't necessarily know that I would call this a thriller. I feel like this aired more on the side of mystery. There's a lot of elements of this that kind of reminded me a little bit of Agatha Christie. It's very much like a classic whodunit kind of mystery book. So in this book we're following a pretty wide cast of characters. We're following mainly a bunch of co-workers as they go on this little like work retreat in the French Alps at this very isolated ski chalet, and then an avalanche happens, and so now they're even more stranded there. They end up losing power, and then they start getting picked off one by one. So this book is told in 2 different perspectives. One is from the perspective of one of the co-workers that is on this trip, and the other perspective is actually somebody that works at this ski chalet that ends up being stranded there with them. So I gave this 3.5 out of 5 stars. Ruth Ware is one of my favorite like thriller authors, so I was a little bit underwhelmed with this book. It definitely wasn't as good as some of her other ones. This still probably isn't my least favorite Ruth Ware book though. I think The Turn of the Key still holds the title for my least favorite Ruth Ware book. I liked this one a little bit more. So I think one of the main issues that I had with this book was definitely the characters. We have a pretty big cast of characters, however, I really did not care about any of them. Like, I truly had no investment on if these characters lived to the end of the story or not, which as a very character-driven reader that was kind of a problem for me. I did still enjoy the plot of this. Like I said, it's kind of like your classic whodunit mystery. I haven't read one of those in a while, so it was nice to read one again, and I do think that overall this was an interesting enough mystery. I liked how the story was told. I can't exactly explain that to you without spoiling it, but I like the element of the way that this story was told. I can't tell you exactly because it would be a spoiler, but if you've read it, hopefully you understand what I'm saying. However, on the flip side, I did predict the ending of this book pretty early on. Like, before the halfway point of this book, I knew who the killer was. So that is a little bit of a bummer, depending on how you look at it. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know, does that like make or break a mystery or a thriller book for you if you're able to predict the ending? Or are there times where even if you predict the ending, the story is still interesting enough that that doesn't affect your rating? Let me know in the comments. For me, I feel like it's kind of a case-by-case basis. I didn't mind as much with this because I did enjoy the way that the story like played out, but at the same time I do kind of wish that it had that like shock factor of like finding out who the killer is. So overall I still enjoyed it, but I was a little bit underwhelmed, and I think I would probably recommend this book to people that enjoy reading mysteries rather than thrillers, or if you're like really new to the thriller genre, this might be a good one to start with. Next up we have a graphic novel, which is Star Wars Mutiny at Mancala. This was a 4-star read for me. I really enjoyed this. This actually was kind of a prequel to one that I read back in November, I think, called Hope Dies, which I gave 5 out of 5 stars, and that was like my favorite Star Wars graphic novel that I've read so far. This one actually takes place right before that one. I just unfortunately ended up reading them out of order, but I'm pretty sure that this was written and illustrated by the same people that wrote that other one, and I just love the illustrations in this. I think they capture like the characters' faces, or like the actors' faces rather, really realistically. So I just love the artwork in these ones specifically. So yes, this was a 4-star read. Would highly recommend it if you are reading through these Star Wars graphic novels. Next we have my first ever manga, which is this Nightmare Before Christmas story called Zero's Journey. I thought that this would be a good place to start with reading manga because it is a story and like characters that I'm already familiar with, and also it's one completed story in here, so it's not like one of those really long manga series that I'm kind of afraid to commit to. I felt like this was a good place to start, and it was a little difficult at first getting used to reading this backwards, because not only do you read the pages backwards, but you also have to read the page itself from right to left, which was really weird for me at first. Kept reading the dialogue backwards and being like, this doesn't make any sense, but then once I actually caught on to it, like once it clicks, then it was really easy to continue to read it that way. So I also gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. This is just like a really cute story. It's very simple, it's not very complex, so there's not really a lot to say about it. It has a very, you know, easy kind of resolution to it, but it was still a really, really cute story. I don't know if this would be considered canon or not, but this does actually give Zero a little like origin story, which was both very adorable and also kind of heartbreaking at the same time. I mean, Zero is a ghost dog, so his origin story is always going to be a little upsetting, but if this would be considered canon, I would be satisfied with this being his actual origin story. So this was just a really cute, fun time. It was perfect to read for Christmas because the concept of the story is that Zero ends up getting lost in Christmas Town, so it's very heavily Christmas focused. And yeah, like I said, I don't have much to say about it. It was just a really cute story, and I definitely am interested in picking up more manga in the future. If you guys have any recommendations for where to start, because there's so much manga out there, like I have no idea where to begin. So let me know in the comments if you have any recommendations for me based off of the other novels that you know that I enjoy reading. Next up we have the short story that I read in December, which I will be honest, I have no idea how to pronounce the title of this book. It's either Galatea or Galatea, or it could be neither of those. I'm really not sure. Either way, this is written by Madeline Miller, who also wrote Circe and The Song of Achilles, both of which I have read and loved. She mainly seems to write like mythology reimaginings, so this is another mythological reimagining of the story of a sculptor who turns one of his sculptures into an actual woman. They end up having a child together, and then he kind of like locks her away, where she only really sees like the doctors and nurses, and then he comes to have his way with her, and she is trying to escape out of this situation and find the daughter that they have together. So I can't tell you like too much, like that's essentially what the book is about because it is very short, so I wouldn't want to give too much of it away. But I also gave this 4 out of 5 stars. It's definitely just like not on the same level as like a full-length novel for me. I don't usually read a lot of short stories because I just like to have more out of my stories than that. So I gave it 4 stars because I still thought that it had beautiful writing. Like Madeline Miller does have like such beautiful writing that goes perfectly with these mythological stories. And so yeah, I did really enjoy this. I would recommend it if you like Madeline Miller's writing, but it just wasn't at like a 5-star level because I just saved those for the most part for like full-length novels, but at the same time, like there wasn't anything wrong with this book. So yes, I read it, I enjoyed it, I would recommend it. And then we have my final read of 2022, which was The Return of the King by J.R.R. Tolkien. As you guys may know, I have been reading through the Lord of the Rings trilogy for the last like 3 years. I've been reading about one a year, and sometimes they would take me a really long time to read because Tolkien does have very rich descriptive writing that sometimes in large doses can just be a little tiring for me to read, even though I absolutely love it. Like I love his writing. I think he has beautiful writing and a beautiful way of storytelling, and I absolutely adore his characters and his world building, but sometimes the writing can be a little bit much to read a lot at a time, if that makes sense. So in the past, like The Fellowship of the Ring and The Two Towers, it took me almost an entire year to read those books, whereas this one, I kind of read it slowly from September through December, but I mainly focused on it in November and December. So I obviously loved this book. 5 out of 5 stars. I might be a little bit biased having already seen the films, growing up with the films, and just already being in love with the world and this characters. I feel like maybe if I had read this for the first time without ever seeing the movies, that I would struggle a lot with the writing and being able to enjoy it. But I think having watched the films first, which I know is like a reading sin to watch the adaptations before you read the book, but I do think that it helps me a lot to just fully immerse myself in these books, and I just adore every second of reading them, even when they are kind of like mentally tiring to read because of the writing style. I still just love them so much, and I absolutely adore these characters. I love the little extra bits of information that you get out of these that they don't include in the movies. There were some like specific differences that I noted from the books and the movies, one of which is not necessarily that the like plots are completely different, but for example, like some things that happen in the Return of the King movies actually happen in the Two Tower books. So one of those, I believe, is like Shelob. I'm pretty sure that whole thing goes down in the Return of the King movie, but that happens in the Two Tower books. So that's one of like the big differences that I see between the books and the movies. There were also some differences in here, like the fact that Saruman's death, like spoiler alert, his death does not happen the same way in the book as it does in the movie. He actually plays a little bit of a bigger role in the book than he does in the films, as well as Grima Wormtongue. But one of the things that really stood out to me in this book that I really appreciated, and I have to mention it, is that something that has always made me sad in the movies is in The Fellowship of the Ring, when they get to the Mines of Moria and they let Bill the pony go, and Sam is really sad that they have to let him go. And in this book, after all the events of, you know, destroying the ring are done, and they're traveling back to the Shire, they stop at, I think they stop at the inn that they stopped at in The Fellowship of the Ring when they were initially going on their journey. And when they get there, the man tells them that Bill the pony made his way back there all on his own, and Sam is reunited with Bill. And I cannot explain to you how happy that made my little heart, because that has always been one of like the saddest scenes in the movies for me, and I don't really remember exactly how or when it happens in the book, if it's exactly the same in the Fellowship of the Ring book, but I had to mention it because I really appreciated the fact that Tolkien added that detail in this book. So yes, 5 out of 5 stars. I've officially read through all of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and I have to say, I kind of want to just jump back into the next one, and by the next one, I mean The Fellowship of the Ring again. I actually have not read the Silmarillion, I don't even know if I'm saying it right. I have read The Hobbit before, but I'm thinking I might need to read that because I did thoroughly enjoy watching Rings of Power earlier this year, and I cannot wait for season 2. So I might try my hand at reading that book now that I did watch the TV show, because I do know that that book is notoriously known to be written almost like a textbook and or like the Bible. So I might jump into that. We will see, but I definitely want to consume more Lord of the Rings content because it has to be one of my favorite like franchises of all time. So those are all of the books that I read in December. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. I'd love to discuss them with you in the comments. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!